As we all know, humans are one of the highly evolved and dominant species, which have survived for so many centuries on Earth. Have you ever given a thought that how that has been possible for humans? We know that, for our survival we had the knowledge to make tools and use them effectively. Later, among humans it was the survival of the fittest and the smartest. Many kingdoms and dynasties came and got wiped out, and the most powerful and the most deceitful have survived. Yes, you heard it right, the most deceitful. Humans have also become highly evolved and perfected the art of telling lies.
It's a basic truth of the human condition that everybody lies.
It's almost reasonable to say that lying is instinctive, because even young children lie without realizing it. No matter how common it is to lie, it is still considered impolite and bad behavior. As they say, tell a lie once and all your truths become questionable. Let us look at some of the biggest lies and liars in world history. At number 10, the Trojan Horse. If all is fair in love and war, this might be the most forgivable of the big lies. When the Trojan Paris absconded with Helen, wife of the Spartan king, war exploded. It had been raging for 10 long years when the Trojans believed they had finally overcome the Greeks. Little did they know, the Greeks had another trick up their sleeves. In a stroke of genius, the Greeks built an enormous wooden horse with a hollow belly in which men could hide. After the Greeks convinced their foes that this structure was a peace offering, the Trojans happily accepted it and brought the horse within their fortified city. That night, as the Trojans slept, Greeks hidden inside snuck out of the trapdoor. Then, they proceeded to slaughter and decisively defeat the Trojans. This was unquestionably one of the biggest and most successful tricks known to history. At number 9, the Ponzi scheme. Charles Ponzi, an Italian immigrant, made a fortune off by lying to people. In fact, he was so good at deception that the government named a type of fraud after him. The Ponzi scheme. In 1920, Ponzi tricked thousands of New England residents into investing in a postage stamp speculation scheme. He promised investors that he could provide a whopping 50% return in just 90 days. Each time a new investor gave him money, he'd use those funds to pay off earlier investors, creating the illusion that they were profiting from a legitimate business. At the height of his huge scam, he raked in $250,000 a day, about $3 million in today's money. But his days of scheming and scamming caught up to him in August of 1920, when he was charged with 86 counts of mail fraud. Number 8, the Pentagon Papers. President Lyndon B. Johnson kept his lies about the Vietnam War locked and sealed, until a military analyst leaked records, exposing the president's war actions to the New York Times in 1971. The Pentagon Papers were a top-secret Department of Defense study that documented the extent of America's political and military involvement in Vietnam, from 1945 until 1967. President Johnson was just one of many presidents included in the papers, along with Harry S. Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and John F. Kennedy, who misled the nation about the United States' direct involvement with Vietnam. The report revealed that Truman gave military aid to the French in their war against the communist-led Viet Minh, and that Johnson began his plans to wage an overt war in Vietnam a full year before it became public knowledge, amongst other secret revelations. Americans used this new information as ammunition to further fuel their protests against the Vietnam War. Some things come to light, but these presidential mysteries have still never been solved. Number 7. The tobacco industry, on cigarette smoking. Blame the cigarette industry for some of the biggest whoppers ever told. We know that cigarettes are both extremely addictive and unhealthy, even deadly. The U.S. Surgeon General issued a report about the dangers of cigarette smoking as far back as 1964. But manufacturers claimed exactly the opposite for decades. These lies weren't even relegated to the 1950s either. As recently as 1994, James W. Johnson of R.J. Reynolds said, "Cigarette smoking is no more addictive than coffee, tea, or Twinkies." That of course is utter nonsense. In fact, cigarettes are addictive on the same scale as cocaine, alcohol, and opioids. In fact, the industry was fully aware that nicotine is addictive, as research repeatedly showed, but continued to deny it. The CEO of Philip Morris likened them to gummy bears, rather than hard drugs. Also, cigarette company leaders repeatedly denied that there was any health risk to smokers, and those who inhale second-hand smoke. Today, of course, it is widely accepted based on decades of research that both first and second-hand smoke are severely detrimental, and that nicotine is highly addictive. In fact, smoking is now known to harm just about every organ in the body, and leads to cancer, emphysema, heart disease, and so on. Cigarette smoking causes 1 out of every 5 deaths in the US, or more than 500,000 deaths each year, including from second-hand smoke. On the plus side, in 1998, the 4 largest tobacco companies, after being sued by most US states, reached a settlement where they agreed to pay $206 billion over 25 years to help defray the medical costs of smoking-related illnesses. At number 6. The Chernobyl Disaster. On April 26, 1986, a nuclear power plant explosion, 400 times the size of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, in Chernobyl, Ukraine, exposed millions of people living in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics to radiation. It took Soviet authorities until an entire day after the incident, before they started evacuating residents from nearby cities. And to make matters worse, they kept mum on the magnitude of the situation and its detrimental health consequences, to both the Soviet Union and the world. It took Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, 18 days to finally confess to the USSR and other nations, just how horrific the explosion actually was, on inhabitants nearby. Fortunately, the residents in contaminated areas were only exposed to small levels of radiation, and most of those who were highly contaminated were successfully treated, but radiation-induced health conditions may still appear in the future. According to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the evidence only shows a strong connection between the accident and radiation-induced increases of thyroid cancer, but some cancer deaths may be attributed to Chernobyl, over the lifetime of the emergency workers, evacuees, and residents living in the most contaminated areas.